Welcome to Everyday Elevations. I'm your host, Jason Fricka, and I'll be taking you on a journey towards holistic health, discovering the power of transformation through expert interviews, in-depth research, actionable advice, and personal growth stories. Welcome back to Everyday Elevations. Before we dive into the topic today, I really want to pull back the curtain a bit and share more of a personal chapter from my storybook. It's a bit heavy, but it's also something that shaped me, and I'm hoping that maybe it'll resonate with some of you. So a few weeks back, I was recording an episode and releasing it. And when I released it, I had noticed there was an issue. There was a hiccup, if you will, or even a glitch in the matrix. After launching my second episode, my heart dropped because I caught an unintended encore. There's a section of my podcast that repeated itself. And my immediate reaction was absolute disgust and fear. That inner critic inside of me, it just screamed, did I ruin everything? Are my listeners going to doubt my dedication? Or even worse, my credibility? Are they going to think that, hey, this guy can't even edit an episode right? Why should we listen to him? And those are the thoughts that are going through my head until I reach out to a friend. And he's like, hey, I got you. Let's get this edited and let's resend it out. And I was like, awesome, cool, got that. And that part was fixed. But not before other people were already able to listen to the episode. And what I realized is that this blip in the matrix, so to speak, it unearthed feelings and doubts that I thought I buried deep inside. A little bit of childhood trauma. And the question wasn't just about the episode when I was asking myself questions. It was about the entire journey. I had these doubts of whether or not I was cut out for this. Is this one mistake going to overshadow all the effort I put into this podcast? Are people going to think I'm a fraud? And then I had to sit back and kind of step outside myself and think, why are these the thoughts that are going through my head right now? As I'm trying to better myself, these thoughts aren't healthy. Where is this stemming from? And I had to really look back on my life. And what I came to was some childhood trauma. For me growing up, my parents divorced at a young age. I believe I was like 3 or 4. And then my dad remarried when I was in kindergarten. And the new stepmom was very abusive. For whatever reason, she never liked me. Like, she hated me. And I don't get it. I was an energetic kid, but what kid isn't? I wasn't a problem child or anything. But no matter what I did, I couldn't get her to love me or, heck, even respect or acknowledge me in any positive manner. My whole formative years of childhood was her breaking and beating me down. It was me being told that I wasn't good enough. I'm stupid. I'm worthless. Nobody loves me. I'm never going to do anything with my life. For years. We're talking from kindergarten until about 6th grade, this was happening. So my formative years of growth, I was being beaten down and broken. And it wasn't just verbal abuse. I was getting smacked, hair ripped out of my head, punched. I was locked outside during the summers of the house. I wasn't allowed back inside, which, in the hindsight of things, wasn't the worst thing in the world because I was outside more. I got to exercise a little bit. I played one-on-one basketball with myself because I wasn't allowed to have friends come over. And it was one of those things where, reflecting on all these things that happened, I realized that I never dealt with those traumas. And it created something inside of me. It created this person who had all these self-doubts. And I thought I had pushed that person down deep down. And I guess I hadn't. And what's cool about finding this podcast and having that issue with the mistakes I made, it led me down a path of reflection into the heart of what many of us face. And that's imposter syndrome. And now I share this glimpse of my story so that you can kind of see where I'm coming from with this episode. And maybe some of you nodding along and you're recognizing bits of your own story in my story. But have you ever wondered why these type of feelings creep in? Why you have these self-doubts? Why you think you're not good enough? What are the science and psychology behind this? Today, we're going to dive into the heart of imposter syndrome. We're going to unmask its many faces and arm ourselves with strategies to champion over it. So, what is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is a perceived fraudulence. It's a conflict between how you view yourself and how others view you. Understand, you could have a PhD, you could be CEO of whatever company, you can get all the awards in the world, but sometimes you deep down still feel like a fraud. And you're not the only one. It's estimated that somewhere around 70% of people are going to experience this at least once or twice in their life. And it's going to happen regardless of profession or status. At some point, you're going to have these doubts creep in. So what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about what can cause this imposter syndrome. The first thing that causes it is family upbringing. In high achieving families specifically, there's a lot of times where it can bring a sense of self-doubt and an imposter syndrome type feeling, because what happens is these families either achieve so much that it's hard to, as a child, reach those same levels, or that they set such high standards for you, it's hard to even reach those. Let's say the family was a family of Olympic athletes, just throwing that out there. Well, they want you to follow in their footsteps most of the time. Maybe not every time, but most of the time. In this scenario, let's just say that they do. Well, now you have to live up to this expectation of whatever sport it is they're doing where they're Olympic athletes, and you have to reach that and potentially try and surpass that just to be able to feel this sense of accomplishment, this sense of self-worth. And it's unfortunate because really when parents are trying to push you harder, it's not that they want to create this sense of self-doubt. They want you to always be better than what they were. But sometimes parents need to take a step back and realize that what they're doing may not be the most positive thing for you. They have to understand who you are and how it's affecting you. And a lot of times in high achieving families, as I said, you get this sense of self-doubt created because of things like that. Now, there's another type of family that can cause some issues as well, and that's the volatile families. Those are families who fight more often. Maybe your parents were very argumentative. They raised their voices a lot. Maybe they were violent. Who knows? But in this case, you're not going to feel like you're supported in this family. You're not going to have that support you standardly would, which in turn makes you feel like you're less than worthy, right? You're going to have this feeling of self-doubt naturally because you're not getting that love and warmth and support that you need. And that happens sometimes in these types of families. The next thing that can cause imposter syndrome would be new work opportunities. And this one's fairly common, actually. When you think about it, when you get that new job, you have so much pressure to achieve and succeed because you don't want them to realize that, hey, maybe you were batting above your weight when you apply for this job. You don't want them to think that, hey, we were wrong about you. So you're going to put so much pressure to make sure that you're going above and beyond what your new bosses want from you, just so that you can get that feeling of, hey, I do deserve this. I belong here. But that pressure will just continue to create feelings of doubt. You're setting yourself up for failure by putting so much pressure on yourself to achieve and succeed. And these new work opportunities feed into that. Understand that your boss might not be thinking the way you are, but you're going to naturally have these feelings of doubts because it's something new to you. It's a new place. You have to build up your reputation there. And that can cause some issues for you. The next thing we're going to talk about is personality. This is another thing that can cause imposter syndrome. With personality, you can have something called low self-efficacy, which refers to your ability or belief to succeed in a given situation. So if you have low self efficacy, you're going to have a hard time thinking that you're going to be able to be successful. And that can carry into your work opportunities as well, carries into everything. Another personality trait that tends to cause a lot of issues and may cause imposter syndrome would be neuroticism. And what neuroticism is, it's simply a reflection of a person's level of emotional stability. If you tend to have neurotic tendencies, you're going to have trouble dealing with stressful things. You're going to react strongly to criticism or perceived threats. And a lot of times you're going to complain without even realizing it. People with neurotic tendencies tend to be a little bit more self-conscious and shy, and they don't deal with adversity well, which is a lot of times why you'll find people who are suffering from imposter syndrome having a neurotic tendency. Now, that's what causes imposter syndrome. What are the types? So we have 5 types of imposter syndrome. The first being a perfectionist. Yeah, I'm sure we all have an idea of what a perfectionist is, but I'm going to break it down a little further. This person believes that if a task isn't done perfectly, it's failure. They set excessively high goals and are disappointed when even the littlest mistakes happen. They think, hey, I got 99% on the project, but I missed out on 1%, so I failed. That's something that goes through a head of a perfectionist. Now, the second type is the superhero. You can call it the superwoman, superman, whatever you want. But the idea behind this is this individual feels they need to push themselves harder and outwork others to prove they're not imposters. This typically tends to cause you to burn out, and it gets you in this thought process of, if I don't excel in everything I take on, people are going to see the real me. I know when I was working in sales and marketing, I always worried about this. I always tried to work extra hard to the fact where I would miss out on sleep. And I tell myself, sleep. Like, who needs that when there's so much I have to do? So many people I have to prove myself to. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that has that thought process go to the heads or have that go through their heads. People tend to try to juggle like so many roles at once, and they're always on the grind. We're in this grind culture in America and in society in general, and it's not always healthy. A lot of people who have this version of imposter syndrome pride themselves on the grind, and it can cause them to have a issue with imposter syndrome. Now, the third type is going to be the natural genius. This is that person who's just so good at everything they do. They're used to skills and tasks and stuff coming so easily. But when they have to put in effort, it hurts. They feel a sense of shame. They feel like if they were competent in this, whatever this task or skill set is, then they wouldn't have to struggle. So they beat themselves up for it. The fourth kind is the soloist. They believe that they have to do everything independently or solo, because seeking help or collaborating with someone is a sign of weakness. It's a sign of inadequacy. They think that if I ask for help, then someone's going to know that I'm a fraud. I can't do this. That's what the soloist entails. Now, the fifth and final is the expert. The expert needs to know every detail and always seeks more certifications or training. This way they can feel qualified. A perfect example is, there's a course for underwater basket weaving. Sign me up. They hoard these certifications, always fearing that they don't know enough. Now, for me, I'm a mix of a majority of these. The only one that I don't have in terms of personality types is the natural genius. I find that a lot of these skills and tasks take a lot more effort for me. So the natural genius doesn't flow. But for me, I am a perfectionist. So when I hear myself say, like, things along those lines, it really bothers me. And I realize, hey, I could have the most amazing content, but it's not perfect. If it's not perfect, it's not right. I'm also that type of person who prides himself on work ethic. My whole family are blue collared, and I grew up seeing my dad work way too much. So he worked for a railroad company full time. And then when he wasn't doing that, he would come home and he would drive a truck. And he did that because he wanted to provide a better life for us. But it also caused him to constantly be on a grind. And because of that, me seeing that growing up, that's kind of how I was. I was like, hey, I want to show people that I can work harder and outwork everyone else. And my work ethic's going to prove that, hey, I'm not a fraud. Like, you know that you can count on me for anything. And that if I keep working hard, I'm going to succeed. And that's fine. Like, you want to work hard, but you don't want to grind to a point to where you're wearing yourself out, where you're missing sleep, things like that. And then I'm also a little bit of a soloist. I have a hard time asking for help. And I don't know if it's necessarily a pride thing. It's definitely an ego issue of mine, but I think it's more along the lines of I'm self-conscious of asking for help because I don't know the right questions to ask. And I always worry about how it's going to get interpreted when I do ask questions. So I just try to take everything on by myself and figure it out. And that's not healthy. And I'm also a little bit of the expert. It's because I always want to know everything. I have to have all the information before I can make a decision. And sometimes that puts me in an analysis paralysis where I'm just trying to get all this information and I'll never get enough to move forward. And that's a huge issue. And I just want to share a little bit as to some of my personality types that fit with this. But as I did more research, I figured out, hey, what are some ways to counter these? And for the perfectionist, it's really kind of simple. It's embracing the wobbles. What I mean by that is the journey with its bumps teaches more than just a smooth ride. You want to celebrate mini wins and remember that perfection, it's not really attainable. It's elusive and, to be frank, unnecessary. What you can do is, while celebrating these mini wins, put them in a little victory vault, so to speak. Write down your wins. Whatever the little victory is. Maybe you woke up this morning, you made your bed. Did you have a goal to wake up a little earlier? And you did. Awesome. Write that stuff down. Whatever you did that is a small victory, write it down. Because what you can do is look back on that and realize, hey, maybe my day wasn't perfect. Maybe I didn't execute on everything, but look at all these things I did execute on. Like, how awesome is that? And that's how you counter the perfectionist. For the superhero or the superwoman, superman, what you want to do is you really want to remember life is not a sprint. It's a marathon. We all need to take pit stops and prioritize, delegate, and let go of the need to dominate in all areas. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to succeed in life, and you're going to just wear yourself ragged and hurt yourself. So it's very, very important to understand how to properly take care of yourself in this regard. For the next one, the natural genius, it's fairly simple to counter this one once you understand. It's all about the growth game. The natural genius wants to feel like everything's so easy for them. So what you do is you make every challenge listed as a XP point in the game of life. This way, even if you're not doing amazing with whatever skill set you're trying to learn, understand that every time you try it, it's an XP. Treat it like a video game. As you're trying to progress a character, you're trying to gain more XP throughout. Embrace the grind. And remember, even prodigies have to practice. That's how you counter the natural genius. Now, for the soloist, the simplest way to counter this is really understanding that you can't create a symphony without multiple instruments. And what I'm saying is you need to embrace collaboration and learn from others. You got to see how combining strengths creates magic. And I always like to look at the early Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan, right? In the late 80s, Michael Jordan was phenomenal, taking the Bulls to the playoffs, but they can never get past the Pistons. And then the Bulls draft Scottie Pippen to team up with Michael Jordan. So the whole workload wasn't just on his shoulders. And guess what happened? Just a few years down the line, the Bulls were world champions. Now they're considered one of the greatest teams of all time. Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen are considered one of, if not the greatest tandem duo of all time in NBA history. It's because they realized that, hey, we have to work together. We can't take this on ourselves. And as a soloist, you have to understand that too. There'll be times where you're going to need help. You're going to want to learn from other people. You got to collaborate. Really, it's a lot about taking that ego out of it. And that's how you counter the soloist. Now, the fifth and final one is going to be the expert. What you have to understand is this is more or less just a knowledge knock. You have to remember expertise isn't about the quantity of what you know, but the quality of what you're understanding. So you want to dive deep, not just wide, and understand that even experts have to Google things at times. You're going to have moments where you're not the smartest person, where you're not going to have all the facts. It is what it is. That's life. There will always be somebody in your life at some point that's going to be at a higher level than you. That's called competition. It's healthy. You want that. And once you understand this and understand that it's okay to maybe not have every little fact lined up in place, then you'll be able to move on and get past this version of imposter syndrome. What I want you to do is remember these tools and remember these types, because at some point this could creep up on you. Now, today we had a very revealing episode, and I'm hoping you took some great things away from it. And from our personal struggles to understand the many faces of imposter syndrome, together, we're lighting the path from doubt to unshakable confidence. Remember, the climb makes the view all the more spectacular. So just keep elevating, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, leave us a review, and don't forget to follow us on social media for the latest updates and behind the scenes content.